welcome back to a new video. Today we're doing a research video. Me and Sean haven't been in a video together for a while now, and that's because we find it easier to work separately, especially when doing research videos.
Yeah, so today's video kind of goes off Adrian's video for a few weeks ago. Yeah, Adrian did a video on farming goats, and on the concept of farming, we've decided to do cattle farming.
Because we're moving and we're sort of figuring out how we're going to make a living, and we thought the next step from goat farming is going to be cattle farming. So that's why me and Sean are actually in this video together, because we need two people to basically gather enough information.
Yeah, so the three main points we're going to talk about in this video is how to choose and which operation we're going to be going with, and which cows you're going to use and how the operation will work.
Like I did with the goats, we're going to do it personalized for us, and we'll explain later exactly how it's going to go.
And we're also basically going to talk about how to sell your cattle and all about that. And whatever other information will fit in the video, we'll definitely include that too.
So remember, three main things. We've got to pick which operation we want to run. We're going to find out how to start and do it, and then we're going to find out how to sell them, and we'll try to get maybe some prices, and we'll maybe contact some people and figure out exactly how much we can get and where we're going to sell them. So without wasting any more time, let's begin in the first segment. Hi everyone, this is day 2 of the research task, and I've recorded this video already 2 times, and I tried to record it before and I pretty much finished, and for some reason it just cut out and I didn't have any of the footage, so I'm doing this a third time. Today I've been researching a lot and writing a lot in this book, taking notes and things like that, because I've been learning about all the different forms and different operations in cattle farming. Today I came in with a goal to find out what operation I'm going to be researching and finding out about. There's 3 that I found. Before we started this, I already had a rough idea, and we had requirements of what type of farming we want to do. We knew that we want to have a sort of a operation that's running on our pasture, so on our land, so where there's a herd of cows literally on our land. And that's pretty much all I knew. I knew a bit more info, but we knew that it had to be that sort of operation. But there's 3 different operations. I'm just going to talk about each one I've been researching, so we can cover all of them, so there's more info in this video and I can learn a bit about all the different forms of cattle farming. So the first operation, this one is called a stocker grower operation, and to be specific, it's called a feedlot operation. Maybe I'll move this out of the way. Anyway, a feedlot operation is when a farmer basically has a big feedlot area, and they have a lot of cows there that are fed with feed, so hay or whatever they feed cows. And these aren't grass-fed cows because they're kept in a confined area and they're basically fed all day. And these cows aren't born on the property or whatever. The operator, the farmer, they go buy steers, which is a castrated bull calf, which is usually around 6 months old, so it's already off the milk and stuff like that. But they go buy them in an auction, and they fatten these bulls up, these steers up, for however many months, I'm not entirely sure, but I'm not going to look into it. And they fatten them up as much as they can, and they get them and sell them to the meat processors, so like an abattoir. And this is a very industrial way of farming, I guess. It's like cropping with produce, but it's not grass-fed, like I said, because they're feeding them hay, and it's not very healthy or humane for the animals because they're kept in a confined space. I'm not sure how much, but they don't have acres and acres to roam. They're kept in a confined space and they're fed for, say, 3 months to 6 months. I'm not 100% sure. And they get them full-sized much quicker than you would grazing them on pasture. But they're not as healthy, and you can't market them as grass-fed or free-range or anything like that. But they get them fat much faster because they can control their weight since they're feeding them. And they're basically, like I said, a large-scale industrial business that's trying to produce as much beef as they can, basically. And this is for someone, obviously, who has been in the cattle industry a long time, who has much more expertise and knowledge, and is willing to put the time and energy into it. But not something we would consider doing, really, but interesting to know nonetheless. Now let's talk about the second farming operation with cattle that you can do. And this one's called specialty breeding. And they specially breed bulls. So these are what we call registered animals. A registered animal means if you watched my goat video, I kind of covered this, but a registered animal is an animal with all its breeding history to like prove it's a purebred, because say you've got a herd, it's not going to be a registered animal. This has to be a registered animal, and for example, it might be 2/3 Angus, 1/3 Hereford, and you've got that. But it's very difficult to classify it as a registered animal because there's so many rings you got to jump through, and everyone's saying it's very difficult to have them as registered, but it's worth it because this is the most profitable business out of all three options I've got here. Because some bulls can range from $5,000 to $100,000 per bull, and they also sell the bull sperm if it's a very desired bull and people want to have its genetics, because it's basically breeding the best genetics for herds, and people pay a premium for this. But you have to have a lot of time in your hands. You got to really want to do it, and you most importantly have to have been in the cattle industry a long time and have a lot of expertise. The property we were on a few months ago, and where all the forward driving videos were, the owner's son-in-law's parents were doing that. They were doing specialty breeding, and that's how I initially found out about it. And he was saying how they were getting, $10,000 plus for a registered bull, and these animals are expensive. But obviously, he knew what he was doing, and it's what's considered hardcore farming. Not something we consider doing now, but maybe something we consider doing in the future. And yeah, interesting to know nonetheless. It is the most profitable business, but everyone who I've watched and read everywhere, they're always saying for someone starting out in farming, or someone who's got who just wants to run a small scale family homestead, have how many cows on the property just to have, it's not a business you want to go into because it takes a lot of time and expertise and things like that. Now on to the last option, the last operation, and the one that we're going to be researching, and that's cow and calf operation. So a cow and calf operation is the most typical, as far as I'm aware, operation that you'll see. So if you're just driving in the country and you see a herd of cows running, grazing and lying down, that's the cow and calf operation. It's where you have a herd of commercial animals, they're called, not registered, so they don't have their breeding info or anything like that. Commercial herd, and say you have a herd of 50, you'll have, 2 bulls and 48 breeders, they're called, when they're breeding. And they say cow has roughly 1 calf every 12 months, and you sell those 50 cows for however many breeding seasons. So every year you'll sell, say you got 50, you'll sell 50 cows every year. And those cows, say 50% of them are bulls, you'll castrate them, and they'll be steers, and around 6 months old is when you sell them. So that's why it's called a cow and calf operation. So you sell the calves once they reach around 6 months. I'm going to do more research into this. That's the whole video. We're going to find out exactly. But that's how it works, and it's the most common and what we're going to be doing. So they're basically grazing your land, they're cutting your grass for you, you're making money by selling them, but it's not close to as profitable or has as much potential as something like a specialty breeding. But I'm not going to talk too much about it since I want to save it for when we actually get the info. So we've chosen, and it's cow-calf operation. Before I go away, Sean's got to be talking about the breeds. He's got to find out about all the different breeds and the best one for this operation. He's got to look into the area. He'll explain about that. But that's me for now, and see you next clip.
Hello everybody, don't mind my hair, it's just bed hair. For this segment of the video, I'm going to talk about cattle breeds and which cattle breed you should go for your operation, and which cattle breed we are thinking of going for our operation. I'm talking strictly from Australia, so if I don't mention some breeds that are popular in other countries, this may not apply to you, and specifically the state of New South Wales. So I'll be talking about breeds that are popular in that part of Australia. So the first breed I want to talk about is Angus, and Angus is probably the most popular cow breed in the world and Australia. Maybe I'm wrong about that, but it's a very popular cow breed. And these cows usually are small to medium size. They generally low maintenance. They are considered a calm breed, and they are good for cow-calf operations. For smaller scale operations like a cow-calf operation, they are very good breed to go with for like people that are beginning with cattle. They are polled cattle. They do not have horns. So a lot of people aren't fans of horns because the horns can be dangerous to them, and buyers don't particularly like them. So you can get a bit more for polled animals. So that's a plus for Angus. Angus are very profitable because they're they're good quality meat, and they're easy to handle, and there's a lot of them, and they're popular in many different areas. So they're profitable, and they are in demand. So you don't see Angus everywhere in Australia. You normally see them, not always, but they are preferred to be in areas with more rainfalls, such in Australia, such as Victoria, Tasmania, some parts of New South Wales, some parts of Western Australia where there's more rainfall. They're suited there because I guess they don't do as well in hot environments. So yeah, that's all I really want to say for Angus. They're a very good breed to go with for something like a cow-calf operation, and if you're getting into cattle, they're a good breed to go with because they're profitable, they're calm, good around children generally, and yeah. Alright, the next breed I want to talk about is Hereford. I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing that right, but that's how I've been saying it for the past few days. So Hereford's also a popular breed of cattle in New South Wales and Australia and the world. They're not as popular as Angus, but they're still very popular. They're also very low maintenance, probably one of the least maintenance cattle breeds for beef in the world. Probably even less maintenance needed than Angus, because when I went to a farm in New South Wales, I was told this guy had Hereford cattle, and I was told that he went with them instead of Angus because Angus, he said, you need to trim the hooves, and that's kind of an annoying thing to do. So he said with these Herefords, I haven't found that I had to do that, so they're even lower maintenance than Angus possibly. Also, they have horns, so they're not polled. So a lot of people don't like that when you're selling them. But if you don't mind cattle with horns, that's not a big deal. But they are not polled, so they do have horns. A good thing about this breed is they are also calm. So they are considered generally calm. They're not known for being too aggressive. So the horns shouldn't be too much of a problem. But I wouldn't get too close to the horned ones if you're unsure. But these cattle, they are fast growing, so they grow fast. They are hardy animals, so they can last in cold and hot environments, and they have a good meat quality. And also, they are known to have a long amount of time to be reproductive, so they can reproduce for a long time. I'm pretty sure most cattle are after the 10-year mark, it's already like going downhill, and after that point, they usually won't be able to reproduce. But for these animals, I'm pretty sure for females, it's 15 plus years they can still reproduce, and for males, it's 12 years. So they can reproduce for many years, and yeah. So I've heard that this can vary in different areas, but I have heard that Angus, you can usually get a bit more than Hereford, but generally it's around the same price, maybe because of the horns or because Angus is more popular, you get more for Angus, but they're still profitable. Not as profitable as Angus, but they're still a profitable cow breed, and definitely a good cow breed that we are highly considering. So I'll talk about two more breeds. So one is Brangus. So Brangus is a mix of Brahman, which is a breed that I'll talk about right after Brangus, and Angus. So it's around 3/8 Brahman and 5/8 Angus. They are popular in New South Wales, and they are used for beef. The meat is also high quality and has a lot of marbleization, which is definitely looked for in the quality of meat. The cattle are very good parents, so they look after their calves, so that's an important thing. And they are kind and calm usually, and so it's family friendly, good for family farms, and they are right around children. And they are very good with withstanding hot temperatures, because the one of the counterparts, because it's Brahman and Angus, Brahman is basically cattle that can last in hot environments. They have very long ears, and when they have long ears, that's usually a sign they can last in hot environments. So they can last in hot environments. So Brahman, because of the Brahman counterpart in the Brangus, they are good in hot climates as well. And the overall a good option, maybe not as popular as something like Angus or even Hereford, but they are a good option that you should definitely consider. Alright, so now to go along with Brangus, we'll talk about Brahman. So Brangus is a mix of Brahman and Angus, but let's talk about Brahman. So Brahman usually isn't seen in New South Wales. When we went on our trip to New South Wales and Queensland, I didn't really see Brahman in New South Wales, so this doesn't really apply to New South Wales, but in Queensland I saw them everywhere. Brahman are the one with humps. I'll show a photo. They're the one with humps and long ears, and they can last in hot temperatures, so you'll see them in Northern Territory, you'll see them in the northern states. So this cattle breed can be very profitable, specifically in the bulls. When people do something like specialized breeding operations, like registered breeding operations, basically they all want Brahman because Brahman are very good bulls. They're very good genetics. A bad thing about these cattle is that they are known to be quite aggressive. Not generally, but they can be aggressive, so they're definitely known not to be good around children. So if you're worried, if you want to get them for a family farm, it's not necessarily the best option. So I only talked about 4 different cattle breeds. The main, since we are looking at New South Wales, the main breed I am focusing on is Angus and Hereford. So as I said earlier, when we went to a farm in New South Wales, this guy had Hereford because he likes that they're low maintenance, because you don't have to trim the hooves, that's what he said, and he doesn't mind the horns, which some people don't like. Angus, they could be a bit more profitable, so a lot of people go with them, but he says I'm fine with taking Hereford because of the maintenance, because he just wants everything to run smoothly. Those are the 2 breeds we're trying to decide which one to get, so either Angus or Hereford. No matter which breed you go with, both are a great option. They both go for around the same price, but Angus is probably in high demand, so they are probably the better one to go with. But if you're strictly focusing on maintenance, Hereford's probably less maintenance. So those are the main points to consider if you're choosing between those 2 breeds. Okay, that's all I'm going to talk about just for which breed to go with and which breeds we are thinking about getting. If you are in a different area where these breeds aren't usually seen, just basically get on the Google search, call up some people if needed, and you can find out just like me. On to the next part of the video.
Hi guys, it's day 4 of the research, and it's been a long day of research today, watching a lot of videos and writing a lot of things down again. Today we've got to finally get started on how we're going to start the cow-calf operation, basically the steps we've got to take and everything you got to check off the list. First I'm going to start off by talking about the basic infrastructure you want for cattle. So just the basic stuff that you have to have, and so you're buying a property, make sure they have everything you need. So there's a few things. First, I just want to say, with all these things, since you're just starting out, try not to spend too much money. Everyone who I've watched has said this. Try to do it on the cheap. Make it secure, make it usable, but try to do it on the cheap. First, a thing you need is cattle yards. So if you're going to be constantly, having to move your cattle through to, say, for whatever reason, you need a worm them or anything, or you want to load them up onto a truck, you got to need cattle yards. Also show some videos or some photos, just basically a gate where you can transition them and slowly move them. There's a few different ways you can do this. There's new ways. They do it these days. I'll show a clip now.
You enter here after you push your cattle up, and you've got your gate between you and the cows, and that certainly increases your safety. You enter from this side, that way the cattle don't have a tendency to go here. And with this gate, I keep minimizing the opportunity for the cow to go anywhere but in the alley. As I get past any vertical stay, all I've got to do is push across like this, and the latch will block and protect me from that cow possibly kicking back, hitting me with the gate, or turn around and trying to force me back. And if I want to stop this anywhere, I can slam it across here, and that'll keep the cattle. If I see they're going to turn around and challenge me, I can slam that. Otherwise, I can just keep pushing them up, minimizing their opportunity to go anywhere but into them.
So that's just like a new way they do it. It sort of cuts it off and you move them section by section. But anyway, that's sort of a basic thing everyone has to have. Doesn't really matter what you do, but if you're buying a property, make sure you have it, and you'd have to look more into it for which one you want. But something simple like that. Secondly, you need a chute and a head gate. So a chute is basically once you've run them through the yard and all that stuff, you got to get them to through a chute, and a chute is quite narrow, so they can walk through it, but they can't turn around. And at the end of the chute, you want to have a head gate. So this is basically a thing where they walk through and you close it, and it basically holds them around the shoulders. I'll show a photo or a video or something. And when we're on Carl's property in New South Wales, we saw he had one, and it holds them together, and this is used for when you need to worm them, when you need to castrate them, when you need to do whatever. This is how you hold them in place. And there's a few different ones you can get. You can get one where you basically you have to open it and you quickly close it before they get through, or you can have a self-catch one, so it's slightly opened, and as soon as they try to walk through, they pick their head in and it shuts on them. I'll try to find a clip.
Through here. Hits this with his shoulders.
Those are basic things you need. What else? You need a shelter, because these animals need a shelter, especially when it gets really sunny. Obviously you got trees, but you also need a shelter if you want to separate one, or you need shelter with just go and a feeding area. So you need some sort of shed, maybe like an open shed where it's just got the walls in the back, and you keep your hay in there, you keep everything in there, and it's connected to a corral, which is basically just an area where you feed them, and it sort of connects to the shed. I'll show some photos. And Carl also had this on his property, and you just feed them or you do whatever there. You basically need this, so these are must-haves pretty much. I'm also just going to say some tips from watching videos that I've encountered by watching the videos. They say that when you're getting them through the chute, it's quite it's a difficult experience if you don't know what you're doing. A good way to do it is every time you run through that procedure, have a bucket of treats. It's called it's some sort of cow treats you put at the end, so they know that they're going to get a reward after they go there. So it'll make the whole experience easier, and it'll sort of get them in a routine. And you should do this with all sort of things. You got to reward them with a treat so they get excited to go. I also want to say a bit about the fencing. I know on Carl's property he sort of just had obviously the perimeter fence and a fence where he didn't go because that was the bull paddock, but there was just an area and they pretty much roamed wherever they wanted. And this is called free range. Some people do controlled grazing, which I'll talk about in a minute. But with the fencing, it's like try to do it on the cheap, because especially cows, they're not going to try to run away, break out or anything. But you just got to have a decent fence. Use what you can. With the fencing, remember it's important to do it right the first time. Most properties, if you think about cattle and you're buying a new property, will have basic infrastructure, and try to do it secure and good, but you don't want to overdo it or anything like that. It's important to have good, strong yards where you keep the bulls separately, because the bulls can ram something over, so you need proper metal yards where you keep the bulls separate at times. And yeah, just keep it simple. You can use whatever you have, wooden posts, barbed wire, things like that. Some people do electric fencing. I don't want to talk too much about the fence because that's sort of something I can only tell once we actually go and do it. But I've talked about it in my goat video as well. Now let's get on to land, grazing, pasture, all of that stuff. How much you can, how many cows you can run per acre, how you got to do it, what's the grazing got to look like. So first let's start on how many cows you can run per acre, and then I'll name all the different techniques that you can do to get certain results. So typically they say it's around 2, sometimes in the bad places where you can run cows 3 acres for 1 cow. We're sort of trying to make this video specific for us, and I know in New South Wales, especially northern New South Wales, it's very good forage there. There's very long grass, high rainfall. The way you know how much you can run per acre just normally is by seeing how much forage there is there, variety of forage, and also checking your rainfall in the area. So that's a good way to know. Check your rainfall. And so yeah, 2 per acre, 1 per hectare, roughly like that. And that's how you just leave them in a, say, you got 2 cows, you leave them in a 4-acre paddock all year round, it's fine. And that's how it works. But some people don't have a lot of space to work with, and they try to get the bang for the buck the most efficient way possible. They try to fit as many as they can, and they do something called rotational grazing. So rotational grazing, some people rotate them monthly, weekly, and some people do it daily, or even I was watching someone did it twice a day. And what this does, it basically allows you to fit more cows per acre. And it does this because you're basically allowing the pasture, the forage, to regenerate and to grow back faster. Obviously, the more often you do it, the more forage will grow back. It all depends on how dialed in you are. They can fit up to 1 acre per cow once they get a good process going. Some, I remember I was watching a video, they run 35 cows on 30 acres. That's because they're so dialed in, and they really got a good process going. And the way they do this, they have, say, one big paddock, say a 35-acre paddock for 35 cows, and they split it into sort of, for example, 35 different paddocks, and they move them every day. I'll show a video quickly, clip here.
Pull that off, let that go. Go, wait! Suck, come on, gal. Come on. Suck, come on, gal. Come on, gal. Suck, come on.
So that was how they move them. He had this wire which he lifted and moved, and that's how he quickly gets them going through the day. Obviously, that's not something we'd want to do. We sort of just want to have cows just because we want to have cows, and we want to have more than enough land for them, so we can not worry about doing all that stuff, so it's least maintenance possible. Also about the pasture, cows, even though they are a grazing animal and they eat very basic stuff, it is important to have different forage for them because it keeps them healthy, and you do want to keep your cows healthy because that will determine how your calving goes, how all your breeding goes, the quality of your meats, the quality of your cows, the health of your cows. And you obviously don't want to deal with all these health problems with cows. So yeah, you want to have a variety of forage. You want them to be healthy all the time so you don't have any problems with health or anything like that. So I think that's got to wrap up forage and how much you can run per acre. So let's just sum it up. So typically it's 2 cows per acre. If you decide to do rotational grazing, which means you're constantly moving them from paddock to paddock, which if you have the time for and you actually need to basically fit as many cows because you have a smaller farm per acre, you want to fit as many cows, that's something you could do. But for us, we're thinking of just doing no rotational grazing, just leaving them to graze. You can fit up to 1 acre for a cow if you do rotational grazing, but it's personal preference, obviously, but you do get a lot better results. So now let's talk about what you need to have to look after your cows. You need to have water, and I'll talk about feeding a bit. So obviously in Australia, in New South Wales for example, you don't really get snow, so the winters are pretty good, but it still does get cold, and depends how much you're running. For us, we're trying to run operation where we have plenty of land and we don't have to worry about any of that. So feed only applies in where we're thinking if you're trying to put more cows for the amount of land, you might have to, I remember Carl was saying you might have to provide a bit of hay during the winter. But and that would be in the corral area. So that's pretty much all I have to say about hay for this operation. It's not that important for us.
Hi everyone, I'm just making a quick video in editing. I forgot to mention, but there are these things that are nutrient lick blocks for cows and they keep them healthy. So yeah, I forgot to mention that.
So water. With water, these cows drink a lot of water. I think it's up to 100 litres or 150 litres a day. So you do want to have a reliable water system. So it's ideal to have some sort of running water on your property, and you can fit that where where they can access the water. You can fit their paddock around it, or if they just walk around everywhere they can access it, like something like a creek or a river like Carl had on his property. That is ideal because then you never have to worry about water. But things like a dam, in some areas obviously you don't have access to running water. Dams are good, but obviously they depend on the climate and things like that. So if there's drought, obviously you're not going to have water and you're going to have problems. But you can also have a pump feeding into a dedicated area where you feed them, where you give them water. And I saw a few videos, but obviously that's worst case scenario. Ideally you want to have some sort of running water, but most places won't, so a dam is fine. Alright, so let's wrap things up, just quickly summarize everything. So with the infrastructure, remember, don't go spending too much money. As long as it'll do the job, that's all you need. You need your basic infrastructure, just a small area where you can feed them, maybe connect it to a shed. But as long as you got plenty of trees, you'll have plenty of shelter. And a good water source, which is important, so you don't have to worry about that. So now Sean's got to talk about how to get started in choosing literally your animals, your livestock, and I'm not going to go into that. So see you next clip.
Alright, hello everybody. Now continue on the topic of getting started and what you need to do to get started when you're getting started in a cow-calf operation or getting a herd. I'm going to be talking about how to buy cattle and basically everything about getting cattle for your herd. So the first thing I should start talking about is where do you go to buy your cattle. So there's two different places you can go to buy cattle. You can either buy it at a sale yard, so an auction, or you could buy your cattle, say you see a post, a farmer selling his cattle, or you know a friend who's selling cattle, so private sale. So those are the two options. So first I'll talk about basically what it'll be like if you're buying it at an auction and if you should. So if you're beginning and it's your first time buying cattle, if you are going to an auction, it is definitely recommended to bring someone along, like an expert, or maybe not even buy the first time, just to go along with someone who's buying, so you can get an idea of how the auction works, because there's a lot of things that go into an auction and it can be confusing, it can all happen rather fast, and the buying experience may not go as planned. So the first thing you should do is probably go with a friend who's buying cattle, or go with an expert and see what he tells you, and basically just spectate and learn from it. So at the auction usually there'll be lots of animals, so maybe 5,000, who knows more, maybe a bit less, probably usually less, but it can be up to around 5,000 animals, and you're only going for a small amount. So there'll be a lot of different categories of animals. There'll be young calves, there'll be bulls, there'll be heifers, there'll be steers, there'll be yearling steers, and there'll be pregnant cows, so with a calf. There'll be a pair, so a cow and a calf. There'll be specialized breeding bulls sometimes, so like expensive bulls. There'll be, what else will there be? There'll be a lot of different varieties of cattle. So you want to go in there knowing exactly what you want to buy, and possibly even go there earlier just to see how it's going to work, because when they bring out the animals to show them, you only get a few seconds really to look at them, and then the bid starts. And if you've ever been to an auction, you know that bidding is very fast. They spit out numbers, half the time you don't understand what they're saying unless you have experience, and people are bidding, you don't know who's bidded. So it's definitely unsafe if you're not sure what you're doing. As I said before, go with someone, just spectate, and then when you're ready, go to an auction and buy. You'll get better at going to auctions in your experience with buying and selling cattle. So the other option, as I mentioned, when you're buying cattle is a private sale. And if you're starting out, or even for anyone, this is a very good option, especially if you know people in the business, because you can get access to good animals. So a lot of time on Facebook Marketplace or anywhere, Gumtree, literally anywhere where you can advertise, you'll see people advertising that they're selling cattle. You can go there, ask them questions, see if it meets your criteria, meets your requirements, and you can do it that way. So that's a much safer way. It's not a bid where there's all these different animals and all these different people who know what they're doing are there. It's just basically private selling and private buying. So that's a good option. So check out, people are always selling, so check out your Facebook, and there'll be people selling there, or just maybe there's some websites where people advertise it there. So that's a good option. So now let's talk about what to look for when you're buying cattle, because you may know what you want, but you're not really sure what to look for in the animals, and you're not sure if you've got to buy a good animal. So the best way to do that is to look at certain characteristics that the animal has, such as a good body composition. That's probably the most important thing, because if it's, I don't know, crooked or too skinny and not well developed, you want to stay away from them. And there are certain things like illnesses and diseases that animals can get. They can get pink eye. Sometimes they have like a bad flu. They can get a cold. Look out for snot. Avoid that. They'll cause you problems. Look in their step to see if they're limping. Maybe they have something wrong with their hooves. And you want to look for stuff like that, because you want to buy an animal that's basically nice and healthy, because they'll be good for breeding later on. They'll be healthy and you will have less maintenance, and it's just better for everyone. Also, an important thing to basically identify overall health in the animal: their coat. Look if it's shiny. That's usually a good sign of good health, and that's basically everything you need to look out for in terms of their characteristics. Say you're buying cattle but you're not sure when to buy, because the prices, the market, so the cattle market does fluctuate a lot and is different in every area. The prices can be different, but you do want to obviously buy cheap and sell high. That's always the goal in business. But so definitely look for the cheaper price when you go to buy. A way to do this, you can either call up sale yards or just basically go see different prices and learn over time what's a good price. But there's this website, it's the MLA website, and basically it says what the average price for certain cattle, like whether they're steers, heifers, grown bulls, grown heifers, or calves. Like they'll show the prices in a timeline, so how the price has fluctuated over time in the past year and the past months, and you'll basically know what a good price is to buy. You'll try wait for a better time to buy, so look out for that. Don't go buying them at skyrocketing prices, because later on when you want to sell them, the profit you turn over may not be as good as you would have hoped it to be. So it's all good that I told you how to buy cattle, where to buy it, and what to look for when you're buying it. But when you're starting a herd, you may not know what to go with. Usually when you're doing a cow-calf operation, they say it's better to start small. Say you have a goal to reach 50 cows, right? And you maybe only want to start with a few, or 5, maybe 10. And a lot of people, they buy cow-calf pairs. So they'll buy a cow and their calf, and they'll buy a bull, and they'll buy a couple pairs, and they'll buy a bull. So basically, they already got them started. They already have calves to start with that they can either sell at butcher weights, or they can sell when they're a bit older, whenever they want. And they have cows there and a bull, so they can produce more cows to go further. So that's basically getting in the operation going straight away. Or what you can do, say you have time on your hands, or you just want to save up some money and kind of let the process basically pay for itself. What you'll do is just buy calves that are old enough to look after themselves. So probably calves that have just been weaned, or maybe you can wean them yourself. Some people even go as far as buying like day-old calves or something like that, and they have to bottle feed it and properly look after it. But that's a hassle, and you do need some expertise. So if you're buying calves, definitely try buying older, because that means you'll have to look after them less. So overall, after some time, you'll have older cows that you can sell off for slaughter, and then make money off them to buy a herd, to start a herd. Or you can basically say you buy steer and heifer cows. You basically start forming your own herd, buy them young, raise them up, save money to basically pay for the herd that you're building. So that's an option. Start with calves, eventually build up a herd over time. But if you want to get right into it, probably buy pairs, and then you're ready straight into it and buy a bull. So buy a couple pairs of cow and calves and buy a bull, and you're already getting going. Alright, so I think that's all you need to know for starting out in buying cattle. So I taught you how to buy them, where to buy them, what to look for, what you should buy. Obviously it can vary, different breeds do vary, so yes, but I think that's everything you need to know. So let's go on to the next segment of the video.
Hi everyone, it's day 5 of the research project. Again, I'm recording this exact same video twice because the footage cut out because we've ran out of storage, but what can you do? I recorded the whole thing and I'm doing it again. Today I'm going to be talking about the breeding, how the breeding's got to go, what to do in breeding, all the different types of breeding and which breeding we're going to go with and everything like that. First, let's start on the different types of breeding, and that's just natural breeding, and then there's artificial breeding. So first let's start with natural breeding. So natural breeding is just when you naturally have a herd with a bull in it, and every year you produce roughly, I think it's 12 months, you get one calf from each cow. So a healthy heifer should be producing one cow every year. Obviously if you have twins it's 2. I'll tell you the ratio. You have one bull for around 30 cows, and you could go upwards to 1 to 50, and we're also thinking of doing something like that around 51 bull. And the bulls you can either keep with them all year round, or you can only put them with the whole herd during the mating season. So I know Carl, he told us he was doing it all year round and he just let them roam together, and this is good, but you're not going to be able to manage it as well, and you've got to have calves getting born, and you're not really going to be able to predict it. Or you could have it where every year cows go into heat for around 45 days. It's like I talked about with the goats, if you saw that. There's a period for 45 days where the animals go into heat, and that's when they mate, so mating season. And you can keep the bulls separate for the whole year, and for these 45 days, that's when you bring them together and mating season happens, and you'll be able to manage your operation much better. Now let's talk about artificial insemination. That's what it's called, also known as AI. So this is when you, say, have a herd of heifers and you don't want to have a bull, so instead you go buy a reputable bull breeder who has good sperm from a reputable bull, and you artificially inseminate it, and you need a trained professional or someone who knows what they're doing to do this. And there's also additional expenses. You need a tank to be able to hold the semen and basically keep it fresh, and the longer you want to keep it and the more of it, the more you got to spend on that. This is good for people who basically have a smaller herd, like say a herd of 10 heifers, and it's not as worth it for them to have a bull, because a bull, you know, you can have a bull for 50 heifers, so it's not as good value, and they find it easier to just have a artificially inseminated system where they do that. So that's better for those type of people, but for us, I think it's a no-brainer to go with a natural one. Now let's talk a bit about how the breeding's got to look like, and calving. So I already said a healthy cow should have every 12 months one calf, but how's calving got to go? Do you have to pull it out yourself, or they just got to do it themselves? So naturally, cows calf themselves, but this depends on the breed, the bull, the heifers, and sometimes you do have to assist them. I know Carl was saying you just wake up in the morning and you see calves lying there on the grass. So you shouldn't have any problems, but you can encounter problems with calving if you have the following. If the bull's too big and you got regular heifers, but then you got a massive bull, it's not going to work well when they have a calf, because the bull or the heifer's got to be too big, and it can kill the cow, or can even kill both of them, or it's just not going to calf naturally, and you always got to have to be pulling them out, which obviously you don't want to do. So Carl, who's been in the industry for probably 40 years, he's been doing it all his life, he says a good way to do it is to have a smaller bull, because first of all, it's a smaller bull and you won't have any problems with the calving, and it all happens naturally. And he does this because he's already getting older and he wants to have the least maintenance possible, but that's also what we want to do. That's our goal. So that's probably what we'll do. Get a good bull and make sure it's not too big though. And the heifers are also very important. If it's not a healthy heifer, it might have problems, etc. Also, with calving, if you don't want to have problems with it, make sure you don't feed the heifer too much while it's pregnant, especially close to the end, because you'll add additional mass to the calf, the newborn calf, before it'll get a lot bigger just before it's born, and that's how you're going to have problems with the calving. So it's a good idea not to feed it additional food, but once the calf is already born, then quickly feed it and get it back up to its optimal weight. So I think that's pretty much it. I'm going to talk a bit about the weaning process. So what weaning is basically getting the calf off of the mother, And there's a few different ways people do this, because it depends on how you got to sell them. If we're going to sell them as steers, usually you already sell them after they've been weaned. And naturally, the cow kicks the calf off at around 5, maybe 6 months old. And this is around the time some people sell it. Some people sell the cows at 8 months. Some people even sell them like at 10 months, a year old. But it depends. But some people, there's a market for even younger cows. And that means the cow's still got to be on the other cows. So you need to basically separate them. And that's where you can do weaning. And you need to do this process where you separate them, and you get them in the area where you got to keep the calves, and you keep them there for a few weeks, and then you slowly remove the mother out of the picture, and that's how you do it. But it's not a thing we're going to be doing. We're going to do it all natural, and naturally after 6 months old, you don't have to worry about it. They start doing it themselves. Now let's talk about the different breeding options for your herd, and this is which herd you got to have. Are you got to have just a singular breed, one breed herd? Are you got to have a crossbreed herd, or you got to have a mixed breed herd? And I know the last two sound kind of similar, but I'll explain. First, let's start with a purebred herd, which is quite a common one. So a purebred herd is when you have just one type of breed of cattle, say just Hereford, for example. You got one breed, and this is very common. The downsides to having a one breed herd is you're not going to get as many adaptations. So some people living in harsh environments, they need, there's multiple adaptations, and a singular breed might not do it for them, so they have to crossbreed. But the benefits of having a single breed herd is that everything is very manageable, because everything is very uniform, and the cows, get to all around the same weight, they calf around the same time, they deal with parasites, their durability is they're all the same because they're the same breed, and you can expect calves to grow at the same rate and have everything more manageable. This is great if you're running a specialty breeding or you're breeding because you need to be able to manage it. For a cow-calf operation, it's not as important because you sort of just sell as the market changes, when's the best time to sell your cows. But it is a good thing if you want to have it simple and easy and don't want to stress about managing them. Now let's talk about crossbreeding. So first I'm going to explain what crossbreeding is and what a mixed breed herd is. So crossbreeding is when, for example, you have a purebred Brahman bull and you have, say, 20 heifers that are purebred Hereford. So if you get this bull to impregnate all of them, it'll be a 50-50 breed of Brahman and Hereford. And this is good, but the only thing with a crossbred, it means you basically, say you have those calves, you can't then have those calves mate within each other, because then it'll be not a pure crossbred. You can only use the exact purebreds that you bought initially to keep breeding. And if you want to expand your herd or replace some animals in your herd, you have to buy the exact purebred animals. This is good for specialty breeders. That's what they commonly do. And it's very good it's hard to manage, but it's good for them because they get exact breeds. A mixed breed herd is basically the same thing, but you're not managing them and you're allowing them to breed again. You don't just rely on the pure breeds to always breed together. So you may have Angus, Hereford, and Charolais, for example, and they're all breeding within each other, and that's how it works. The benefits of doing both of these is you get really good adaptations. So there might be like someone who lives in an environment that gets really hot and really cold, but there's no purebreds that do it for them. So they get a Brahman that deals really well in the heat, and then they mix it with a Hereford, which deals quite well in cold environments, and then they get the best of both worlds. But for our operation, I don't think a crossbred is definitely not a necessary thing for us. We may consider a mixed herd just for the fun of it, and you can sort of experiment with all different cattle. But a purebred herd seems good for us at this point, but it all depends on how basically the animals you can buy in your area. That's all I've got to cover. We've talked about how to breed these things, how the breeding process works, the best options. We talked about specifically for us which options we're going to look into, and that's pretty much it. Thanks for watching this clip, and I'll see you next one.
Hi everyone, back with a new segment of the video, and this segment is a very important one in cattle farming, and that is maintenance and how to maintain the cattle operation and your cattle. So I'll break this up into two different parts. So the in cattle maintenance, I'll break it up in the health aspect of maintenance, so health maintenance, and just common maintenance and stuff like assistance that you'll encounter when doing cattle farming. So I'll start off with health maintenance. Alright, so now for probably the main part of health maintenance, and that is vaccinations and dewormers. So there's a lot of illnesses that cattle they can be subject to, and there are vaccinations for them. So they are available and they are recommended. How many vaccines you give them, which vaccines you give them, or if you vaccinate your cattle at all is entirely up to you, as I'm aware currently. But it's possibly, if you're doing a certain operation where it's maybe more premium quality meat, there's a regulation where you need to vaccinate them or do some sort of shot. And also maybe in some areas it's different, but as I'm aware, you don't have to vaccinate them if you do not want, because when we were on Carl's farm earlier this year in New South Wales, he says he has Hereford breed cattle, and he says they're very hardy, and they do well with parasites, and I don't actually vaccinate them at all. I just give them the anti-wormer. So a lot of breeds are tougher than others, and maybe they don't need vaccinations, and it's entirely up to you. Giving vaccinations will lower the risk of them catching these illnesses, which will be a pain for you and obviously for the actual cattle themselves. So the most common vaccination shots that are given to cattle are the 7-in-1 or the 5-in-1 vaccines. So they contain protection from 7 different illnesses. I might put them on screen, the different illnesses, or some are 5-in-1 vaccines where it's from 5 different illnesses. And there's one for a respiratory infection that is very common amongst cattle, and that's called the IBR shot. A lot of people think it's just enough to give them an IBR shot because that's a common infection, and I'll give them the anti-wormer, and they think that's enough. And it probably is enough, to be honest. Maybe no vaccine at all is enough. That could definitely be enough, because I know a lot of people who don't vaccinate their cattle. They say if you vaccinate the cattle, the shots that are for non-infectious illnesses, you need to get a booster for them every year, and if it's for an infectious illness, they say to get a booster every 3 years for that vaccine. So if you're getting vaccines for your cattle, it is likely you'll have to get boosters for them. So now let's talk about anti-wormers. So probably the most common health problem in cattle and all animals for that matter is they get worms. All animals get worms. Is a very common thing, and when cattle get worms, it can affect their growth, and it can just affect their overall health. If you want them to be extra healthy, get anti-wormers. What people do, they can come in these sprays or these sort of pastes you can put on their backs, and that's all you need to do. Just line them up, spray them, and that's it. Or you can buy feed that already has anti-wormer in it, or you could put something in their feed. And there are many different ways you can do it, and you do it around every 6 months. Every 6 months, sometimes more, sometimes less, it depends, but usually every 6 months you'll be fine by putting anti-wormer on them. So in terms of vaccines and anti-wormer, basically that's the option. It's up to you. Usually they say maybe 1 shot is good to be safe, and anti-wormer is definitely recommended. Pretty much everyone uses anti-wormers. It's silly not to. And they're not expensive, they're inexpensive, and vaccines are also inexpensive, but if you don't feel your cattle need it, it's okay not to do it. It's the last thing for health maintenance I want to talk about is making sure that your cattle don't hurt yourself. So this is a common thing. When maintaining your cattle, there's always these little things that happen because the cattle can hurt themselves, such as maybe you have machinery in the paddock that they can hurt themselves on. That's unlikely, but that is a thing. Like, try to keep it machinery out of where the cattle can walk. That's a possibility. They can hurt themselves there. But most importantly, it's the fencing. If the fencing's damaged, a lot of the time, they can get stuck in there. They can hurt themselves, maybe cut themselves on the fencing. I don't know. It depends if it's damaged or not. So keep an eye that your fencing is always intact and not damaged. And always drive past to see if your cattle aren't stuck somewhere and hurt like that. Also, a lot of the time, specifically bulls, they can be aggressive towards each other, especially when they're not castrated, when they're actual breeding bulls. They can hurt each other. So if you have more than one bull, it is sometimes recommended, if they're aggressive towards each other, to definitely keep them separately, so behind a fence or in a different paddock, because they do fight, and when they fight, they can fight to the death. So you don't want any of that. So keep an eye if your bulls are being aggressive towards each other, and separate them if you need to. Alright, now for maintenance, I'll just talk about common maintenance and things like that, like common things that you'll have to do around the farm when you're running cattle. So one thing is ear tags. So ear tags are a common thing that you'll need to do to maintain your cattle. Everyone does it. You can put them on, they'll put a number for your cattle so you can keep an eye. If everyone's there in the herd, you can keep an eye. You can write down the cattle, on the cattle you can write down their number, and you can write down the parent's number, and you know whose calf is whose. So when new calves are born, it is smart to basically, as soon as possible, give them an ear tag, because you can keep track of them, make sure they don't get lost or wander off somewhere, and you can write down certain details about them if you want, if that can affect your sale or anything you want basically. But sometimes these ear tags do come off. The cows, they try to scratch their backs or something, and it comes off their ear. And sometimes, it gets damaged. Sometimes anything can happen. So always keep an eye. And sometimes you'll lose track of your cows if they don't have ear tags. So drive around, make sure they have their tags intact. And also you can use these tags to basically, it's a very smart tip I learned in a video, this guy, to identify if they're heifers or if they're steers, so if they're female or if they're male. On the right ear for heifers, he'll put the ear tag, and for the left ear, he'll put ear tags if they're males. And that's a good way to identify. Say you're far away and you want to make sure you have all your males and females, and if you're selling your males, you want to make sure you're taking the right ones. So that's a smart pro tip, and that's all I want to say for ear tags. They're very good and you should get them. Another thing that you will have to do, or a livestock manager that you get will have to do, is when you're basically got to sell your males, when you sell them, you usually castrate them at a young age, because they'll help them grow faster. And it basically just, what they do when they sell males is they castrate them at a young age, around 4 months old, around there, could be a bit before, a bit after, and that basically, they get fatter easily, they put on weight easier, and it makes the meat softer apparently and stuff like that. And that's basically like cutting their testicles off basically. However, there's different ways of doing it, but essentially that's what it is, and you will have to do that a lot, especially if you have a bigger herd. So you do have to do that, or your livestock manager will have to do that. And also castrating them makes them less aggressive, they're less likely to damage things. It's usually what people do, so you will have to do some sort of castration sooner or later for your steers, to make them steers basically. Now for some more maintenance that is required for cattle, I'm going to say some common things that you need to assist cattle with, and one of those is sometimes you will have to assist in birth. And this is very common, especially if you have a big bull that sometimes makes bigger calves, and that will put a lot of pressure on the female cows, on the females, and sometimes you will need to assist. So what people do, they get a rope and they tie it around the calf's legs once it's already starting to be delivered, and they basically help pull as the mother pushes basically. Now for another common thing that you'll need to assist your cattle with, and that is sometimes you need to do hoof trimming. So sometimes you will need to trim their hooves. I've heard that from this guy we went to, Carl, when we went to his farm, he said he has Heifers. For one of the reasons is because he went with them instead of Angus, because he said Angus sometimes their hooves grow and you need to trim them. So he went with Hereford to avoid that problem. But if you do have a breed that is prone to basically their hooves growing a lot, you will need to trim them, and trimming them is a big job. I would say you definitely can't do them yourself. If you have experience, you can, but if you're starting out and you find the problem that you need to trim the hooves of your cattle, you'll need to call out a specialist to do it for you. So when you're picking your breed of cattle, try find one that doesn't have these problems and has these problems as least as possible, because they are that is a headache to do, to trim the hooves of your cattle. So that's pretty much all the maintenance for your cattle. There are some other things that I probably haven't mentioned, but I think this is basically enough, just mainly what it is. So I've talked about the health, so they need stuff like vaccinations and dewormers, taking precautions to make sure they don't hurt themselves, and things like ear tags and the common assistance like assisting with birth and sometimes trimming the hooves, and also castrating the bulls. You will have to do that if you want to sell them as steers. So hopefully that wasn't too confusing, and on to the next part of the video. Hi guys, it's later this day, a bit after recording my last video, and this is going to probably be my last video for this whole entire video. Now we're going to be talking about sort of how to make money with this operation and the best ways to make money. So first of all, I want to just say the cow-calf operation is a good operation because it gives you a lot of freedom and in the different ways you can make money, but that all depends on the market. So beef or cattle is a commodity, so the market's changing every minute of every day, and sometimes in a matter of weeks it can drop 50%. And the way the market works, it's basically not an average, but sort of just a rough number, I guess that's kind of average, of basically how each type of cattle goes at the auctions. And the auctions are split up and the market also is split up into multiple categories, and in a second I'm going to be sort of looking on the market and figuring out which is the best for the current time. So, and what I mean by that is when to sell your calves. So right now it might be a really good price. It works by cents per kilo live weight, which is just how the whole animal weighs, like that. And it might be a really good cents per kilo at the moment for steers, and it's split into categories like 0 to 200 kilo steers, or 200 to 300 kilo steers, which is around 6 months old. And steers, the biggest buyers of steers are feedlot operations and finishing, they're called operations, where basically they buy a younger cow and they fatten them up and get them ready for slaughter. And you've got to look for certain things that these guys want, because they're the ones that are buying your stock pretty much. So I'll explain in a second, but that's basically what you've got to watch out for. You've got to make sure you're always keeping your eye on the market, especially if you need to do things like provide extra food and feed and stuff like that for your cows, and you need to weigh up your costs and make sure you're turning a profit. And what I mean by that is sometimes it may be better to, like, say the market's really bad at this point of time, you want to wait and leave your calves to get a bit bigger till they're, say, already a big yearling, which is around a year old, and you might even want to wait all the way up to slaughter weights, because the prices are really low for, you know, younger calves, but they're really good for slaughter weight. Also, if you, like I said, provide feed, it matters how long you keep them, because it depends on how much feed you have to buy for them. And obviously the bigger they get, the more feed you have to buy for all the cows. It also depends how much cows you can run and keep at a time. You don't want to, say for us, we want to say keep 50 cows. If we already keep those calves for over a year, then the new calves will already be born and it'll be like double the cows. So obviously you don't want that. So now I'm just going to on the MLA website, Meat and Livestock Australia, I've used them before, especially in my goat video, I use them a lot, and we've got to just look at the market, see what's the best value, and come to a conclusion.
Alright guys, so I just switched up the camera angle, and now I'm going to be showing you on the screen as well. I'm going to be looking at the MLA website, and I'm just going to be checking all the different categories and what time is the best time to sell your steers at this current moment, and also to buy, because you need to build a herd. So I'm going to be looking in casino. I'm just choosing this area. It's sort of around the area we're looking at, and it's an auction in casino and showing a rough indicator of what the market is at the current time. So when you're doing a cow-calf operation, you're selling steers, a castrated bull, and it's a calf operation. So that means you basically sell your calves, and calves you don't always have to sell them weaned. So they can sometimes what they do after 90 days, while the cow is still needs the mother, basically, they artificially wean them, which is I already talked about earlier. They do that and they sell those, and basically when you I didn't mention this earlier, but when you artificially wean them, they're a lot worse for breeding because they're not as healthy, and these are more for cows that are eventually going to get slaughtered. So people buy these younger ones, and let's look at the prices of these. So I'm going to go in calves, and there's a few different categories, and I'm going to go to 0 to 80 kilos. So that means they're 90 days old. I checked this, and that's what they are basically. And right now it's a all-time high, 18th of August, a couple of days ago. It's selling at 800 cents a kilo, so $8 a kilo live weight, which is very high. But they're only 80 kilo calves. So for people who say they solely rely on feed, this could be a good option for them because they just want to provide a bit of feed for a couple months, and then they sell them straight away, and they get really good prices. But it's only 80 kilos, so you only have a calf once a year. To only get them to 80 kilos doesn't seem worth it, but it might be worth it for some people, not for us. Now let's look at a yearling steer. So a yearling steer is there's a few different weight categories, but it's basically not 6 to 14 months old. That's what a yearling steer is. So it's like in human years, like 10 to 16 or something like that. So there's different categories here. So there's 0 to 200, and this might be a smaller a smaller steer that is only 6 months old. So it's already been weaned and everything, but it's on the low end. And right now it's saying 614 cents per kilo live weight, and that's pretty good. But again, this is only for like 0 to 200 kilos, so very small animals. And for this, it's good for people who might be, like I said earlier, relying solely on feed and, want to just spend a bit of money on feed and get their cows and get their money. But it's not a good option for us, but it's a very high price. Then there's 200 to 280. So like around a month ago, or 2 weeks ago actually, it got to 576 cents per kilo live weight. But this is, so like say 250 kilo animals. And remember, this is an indicator. If it's a bad day at the auction, you might sell for more. If it's a good day, you might sell for less, or if it's a good day, you sell for more. But this is a rough indicator. So it's saying 576 for, say, a 250 kilo steer. That's got to be, it's sort of in the middle ground. Say this is like an 8-month-old animal, but it's still on the lower end. This isn't ideal for stocker feed operations because they want, say, younger animals, but they're pretty big. If they're going to have a really big animal that's already, say like already an old teenager for a cow, it's not going to be that good because they're not going to be able to add much weight on it, and it's not going to be able to turn a profit. So they probably look for around this size and age. And then there's also 280 to 330 kilograms, which is seeming like the best value option, or the other one, but this one's one of the best options. So right now this one's at, alright guys, finally loaded. Around a month ago these were at 592, so these weigh more than the 200 to 280 category, and the price is actually around the same but a bit higher. So these is a no-brainer, obviously better for our options. But this is still quite a young animal. This is, it might be a year to, if you can get your animals at around 8 months to 300 kilos, that's pretty good. And that's a good time to sell them because that's before they start getting really big and, already start taking up a lot of room, because once they're already not on the mother, they don't need their milk or anything, they're already considered dry cattle separate. So it's already taking a lot more. But for us, obviously, we want to have more land than we need. But this seems like a good time to sell them currently. The people that are buying these animals, like I said, are stocker growers, and this is a pretty good weight for them to buy. That's why you can see the prices are so good, because at this weight, they're still got plenty of room to grow, but they're already like well-sized animals. So they're like, these are like the younger ones that are still quite heavy, so they're heavy ones. Because the stocker feeder operators, they're not going to be buying, a 600 or 500 kilo yearling or anything, because they're going to say, oh, I can only add 100 kilos or 50 kilos to this, and it's not going to be worth for me to buy this and then turn a profit, because that's basically what they do. So this is a great option for us. Now we're going to look at the 330 to 400 kilos. So this is already going to be older steers, so close to a year old, or they're going to be like some bigger 8 months old. And there's been a recent drop, but around a month and a half ago they were at 516, and so this is for your 350 to 400 kilo animals. So the other one, I can't remember how much it was, but it was around 570, I think it was, or 590 even reached. And these aren't that much bigger. But for us, it depends how big our cows are. We want to keep them for a certain amount of time. We don't want to keep them for over a year, because then the new calves already be born. So ideally we want to sell them before the new calves are born. So it's really what's the best price at that point. So this is what we're looking at. So if it's 500 cents, roughly 500 cents or even less at times per kilo, and the other ones are 600 cents per kilo, but the size is a bit lower, it still works out more for the other ones, even though they're lighter. So that's obviously a no-brainer. And then this 400 kilo plus, I just want to quickly go over this as well, which are around, they're quite high now, they're 470 cents per kilo. And this could also be a good option, but these could already be older. These could be older steers. If you've got a 10-month-old steer or 8-month-old steer, and you see, or you've got a 6-month-old one, and it's pretty big, but you see the prices for the older ones, the bigger ones, are really good. You might want to wait out a few months and sell then. So right now, these are pretty good. They're being sort of going up only, and it seems like it's pretty good value. So if you got a 400 kilo animal, it's not as worth it. But if you got like say 600 kilo animals for 470 cents per kilo, it'll be a good option. But like we said, we don't want to go past the new calving season. So there's obviously steers, but half of your calves are going to be heifers. So we can also quickly check out the heifer market. And there's also bulls, there's veal, there's grown heifers. So for a grown heifer, it's quite cheap. It's $3.50. Let's look at yearling heifer, so that age, but a heifer, because you also want to sell these at around this age. There's not much information, but they're pretty good. They're around 540, but these are quite small. There's a, let's say they're 200 to 280 to 330. It's around a bit less than the steers, but it's still the same thing. It's around that. You want to look for the point where the stocker feeder operations want to buy, because that's why the prices are up, because those guys are going there, they're bidding higher for those animals, because that's what fits their operation best, and they're fine if they're going to spend a little bit more money. So here it seems that the around the same weight, so the medium to large animals are the way to go. So let's just get off this for a second and let's talk a bit about the condition, because that does matter. I didn't look completely into this, but there's sort of a 1 to 10 rating, and you want to have your cows, I know, the 6 to 10 rating, and they go for around the same price. You don't have anything below, because then it's already a different group of buyers. So that means they're basically full and they're not like skinny or already getting really skinny. So there's not too much to worry about the grade of the animals, unless you're a reputable farmer in your area and people want to buy private from you. So I think that's got to wrap it up. I'm going to do a lot of editing in this video because I want to not make it too long, and hopefully you enjoy it, and hopefully you learned a bit about what's the best time to sell. So right now, let's just recap. It's really good to sell. It's good to sell your calves at around the 8 to 10 month mark. That's a good time to sell them, and around 300 kilos is a good time to sell them. Or if you have a bit more time on your hands and the bigger animals, if you can get a bit more for them, if you're just on grass pasture waiting a few more months, it's good to do that. But that's what's going right now. And Carl also told us, he's like, I can get all for this calf, so there's no point in me waiting this long because it's not going to be worth it for me. So yeah. And also I just want to say one more thing. When you basically have a heifer that, say whatever, it's a breeder and it's not doing so well, it's not performing how it used to, or you just want to replace your breeder and you've got to sell this one, who buys those animals? So the people that buy those animals, say it's an end of the line, it's already a really old heifer, it's not performing. This is what they call a slaughter weight animal or slaughter animal, and these are cheaper ones because they're basically older ones and they're heifers. So people that buy this are the fast food industry. So yeah, they don't really, that's sort of the market they go for. Anyway, see you next clip.
Alright everybody, we are nearing the end of this video, and before we conclude, we'll just want to say anything that we left out, and basically stuff like tips for cattle farming.
I just want to firstly add some things I wanted to add about buying, and I'm just sort of going to recap that. So remember, with sales and things like that, and selling your cattle, there's no set price. Like, there's the market indicators like I showed you, obviously, but it's very important to know with the auctions, if you first of all don't bring them in at a good time where there's not the right buyers there, you got to get a below market or indicated price. Or if there's the right buyers and you happen to have the breed they like at that time, they'll really stock up and bid extra because that's what they need. So there's no set price in this market, so that's why there's really no point contacting people to find where we could sell them, because unlike goats, this is more like a livestock, salesperson, and unlike goats, where you just catch them and you basically bring them in for a paycheck. So there's no set price in this business, and also things like different price for breeds. It's really, the breed depends on what you want to do because of what people are selling in your area and what works for your climate or whatever. But there's also no set price for breeds either, although bidders or people who like buy steers, for example, they do prefer certain breeds like Angus, and they will bid higher for Angus, even though there's no indicator for each breed. They will bid higher for Angus than for other breeds because it's what they specialize in, or for example fast food, they like prefer this breed or whatever. That's all I wanted to add with that.
Yeah, just one thing I wanted to say, just to basically, because a lot of people that are watching this video, they probably don't know much about cattle, and a lot of them that do just are thinking about doing a very small operation, maybe not like 50 cattle or more, maybe only a few because they want to feed their family and just make a bit of extra money on their farm or just for themselves. So for a smaller operation, a cow-calf operation is good, as we mentioned at the start of the video, but you probably only want to have, say you only want to have maybe 5 cows and 1 cow to feed yourself. The best way to go about that operation is just to basically, when you're buying cattle, it's not necessarily important to buy a pure breed, or because you may be looking for like, I heard Hereford or I heard Angus is the best breed. That's not necessarily the most important. Obviously, have a rough idea, but that's why mixed breeds is a very popular thing. People just get all sort of cattle, and it's not a specific market. Just like with goats, it's similar to like with rangeland goats. You basically get the goats that you have and you sell them for all around the same price. So just get cattle that are healthy and good and meet your requirements, and then basically raise them and do it simply, and don't do it too specifically. So you can go for mixed breeds because normally those cattle will be cheaper and it'll be better for something a starting out operation.
And if you that way you get to find which breed works better for you. If you feel one's better than the other, then in the future you could change up.
It's a great base to start at. Just you'll find out which breeds you like and find out where you want to go on from there.
Now I just want to quickly talk about transport, because we didn't touch on this, but obviously it's pretty straightforward. With transport, they usually use these double-decker V-doubles or semis that they have, and you basically just pay someone, or if you have your own truck, to pick it up. And there's also something you need to have, which is an NVD, and I talked about this in my Go video if you saw that. And all it is, it's called National Vendor Declaration. So you have to fill it in before you transport them, so to prove it's safe to eat and all these things like that. So there's this whole section you got to fill in about your details, where it's going, where it's come from, how they've been raised or whatever. And then you got to fill in this little bit for the person who's transporting them. So I just wanted to quickly touch on that so we could have everything in this video. But I think that's going to sum up everything in this video.
Yeah, just let me talk about, conclude and basically sum up everything we've talked about to make it seem clear. So we've talked about basically the different operations there are for running cattle. We've talked about the different breeds there are in cattle and which one you should go with. and we've talked about how to get started, everything you need to get started, everything about that. Adrian's talked about breeding and buying and selling, and then I talked about maintenance and what you'll need to think about when you have a cattle operation.
Yeah, and we've really figured out and learnt a lot on basically how the operation's got to go, and we not only found out a ton about cattle, but we sort of that one step closer to starting one and actually knowing how the whole process goes. So we went from start to finish, and really all there is to do now is start doing it and start learning and see if we like it or
Yeah,
not.
we did learn a lot from research, but obviously real life experience can teach you a whole lot more.
And talking to people.
Yeah,
We
and
couldn't
talking
talk
to people.
really.
So hopefully this gave you a good head start if you need a head start on the cattle industry, and
And you're just interested to see our progress and what we learned. So let's go sum up the video. Thank you for watching.
All right, see you guys next time.
See you next time.